Fear-based narratives presented as wisdom, all right, is another way the brokenness distorts advice. The brokenness will take this fear-based narrative and present it as wisdom. That means that you might not have the high level of emotions or anything playing out, but the person may talk very well, calm, cool, and collective. And because they sound as if they're coming from a place of pure wisdom, we see that the advice is actually distorted because it's the fear-based narrative. Have you ever taken someone's advice and then you end up more confused, hurt, or lost more than you had before? Have you ever been in a situation where someone volunteered so much information around what they would do or how they would handle your situation? You take their advice and then you end up in the same situation or the circumstance you're in? Well, these are realities oftentimes that we see when people take advice from broken people. Let me tell you, I had a really good friend of mine who was going through a lot in his relationship. I think there was loss of intimacy that was taking place, not communicating. The relationship became a little strained, but she had a really best friend. And her really best friend had a lot of advice on how to deal with that relationship. And everything that she gave was sort of toxic, right? She would, give the advice of, you should leave him, or you should check his phone, or you should begin to do these things. And then she follows her best friend's advice only to learn that she had trust issues and she had trauma issues, and she imparted those issues onto the friend who took that advice. And then suddenly her situation was worse than ever. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Not all advice is wisdom. Sometimes it's just unhealed pain speaking and giving advice from an unhealed place. So this is why I take the point and we say that why do broken people in this regard give what I call broken advice? And why do we find ourselves even taking that bad advice? Now, I want to throw out something so we can kind of be clear. When I use the word broken, right, I just want to kind of define this a little bit. When I say broken, it doesn't mean worthlessness or being worthless. It means unhealed wounds, unresolved trauma. It means distorted thinking patterns. It's just a form of brokenness, a brokenness that people may not be aware of. All right, so there's some traits that we see from what I'm going to call the unhealed advisor. You heard that right. The unhealed advisor, the person who is giving advice, but they've not dealt with their own trauma. They've not dealt with their own pain. So what do the unhealed advisor do when someone comes to them from advice or when they volunteer the advice? Here's what the unhealed advisor do. They project their personal pain as a universal truth. Man, you know how women are. One of my favorite ones. Man, bro, you know how these women be out here, and they don't trust that. So you're hearing these projections of these pains masquerading as a universal truth. The unhealed advisor will give advice rooted in fear, control, or avoidance. So what does that look like? Oh, this is funny. So the unhealed advisor, they've been through it. So their advice that they're giving you is so that you don't go through it, not realizing that your circumstance and situation is completely different from theirs. But the unhealed advisor will again treat it as a universal truth. But the truth is, what we're looking is that there's a fear. So I've dated a crazy woman. So and this was her sign, and now you dating her. What sign? A Pisces? Shit, no. Dog, you leave them Pisces alone, right? So the unhealed advisor will begin to universalize everything. Oh, where's she from? Louisiana, New Orleans? No, man, look, bro, you better leave them New Orleans women alone, right? So we began to hear the advice from the unhealed advisor, and in truth, it's their own individualized trauma that they have universalized. The unhealed advisor will universalize certain characteristics. Your sign, they'll universalize where you're from. They will take a situation or a circumstance that you're in that's unique to you, and they will universalize it. You might be an unhealed advisor giving unhealthy advice, and we'll talk about that in a second. The unhealed advisor also confuses survival strategies with healthy living. That means an unhealed advisor could very well, or a broken person, could very well give you advice, but the truth is, it's coping advice. It's not healing advice. Now, again, the unhealed advisor, they will normalize things. Now, to be honest with you, all that I've said, everyone, they find themselves being an unhealed advisor around certain situations and circumstances, right? We've all been through this or become this person at some point. This might even be related to, for example, on your job, right? Something that you went through in your job, and now you got a coworker who looks like she's going through something similar. So all the advice you're given is based off of your trauma. Don't trust any of them. HR ain't got your best interests at heart. You know how the men are in here. So we'll universalize it. So why the people take the bad advice? That's a whole nother one. Because I need to let you understand, the unhealed advisor will always have advice. But the question that we really have to toy with is that why do people take bad advice from what I'm calling the unhealed advisors? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of them. And again, this is an opportunity for you to kind of examine it, right? Number one, familiarity bias. Familiarity bias, what the hell is that, right? We trust people who feel emotionally familiar even when it's unhealthy. This is what you're going through emotionally. They understand that emotional piece, and now y'all sharing in the emotional pain. And so now all of a sudden, it's a familiarity bias. I done been through it. And the unhealed advisor, this is interesting. They sound so convincing, right? Again, these are people that are not dealing with their own trauma. These are not people who are not even taking the time to revisit, to examine how that unresolved trauma is showing up, not just in the situation that they got them into, but they're universalizing and applying to everything. You know, I don't date Black women. You know how Black women are, right? These are traumas that they have now universalized. But if you're dealing with a Black woman and that you're describing what you're going through, and the unhealed advisor has gotten to the point that they've made that argument, and then all of a sudden you start buying into it. That's why I call it familiarity bias. Their pain, your pain sounds so familiar with their pain, and their pain, they have made it become your pain. Right? Some people will take this bad advice around emotional urgency. And these is a very complex one, right? Pain makes us reach out for quick answers, not wise ones. Hold up. I need y'all to let that sit in. People will reach out for a quick answer. That means, I'm going to give a real good example. I have a friend, and I see this for 30 years. I've worked helping men get access and visitation rights to see their children, right? Again, remember emotional urgency. You have a father that has an issue with seeing his child and being involved with his child, and he wants things to happen right then and there, but we're saying it's a process. Right, I'm talking about in the state of Georgia, this could take up to 90 days, even if you do everything the way you're supposed to. That means that you don't have visitation rights and you don't have any legal say-so, but these are the 3 steps that you have to do. But that ain't what you want. You want the quickest way or the shortcut that you need to take. You know, maybe I could get an attorney over there, maybe I could get the police. And so that emotional urgency is when people will take advice from people that say, I'm going to tell you what I want you. I'm going to tell you what you need to do, right? And now we are looking for the quick fix to a complex problem or a situation. Emotional urgency is also, I'm going to give you an example. Y'all got to chew on this. So I work quite often with some of the courts here in metropolitan Atlanta with people who are court ordered for anger management, life skills and decision making. People have gotten caught with substance abuse and have to take a course related to that. But what always intrigues me is that when you're in the waiting area before court, the calendar is called, listening to people give advice on what someone should do. That means you listen to their story and you go, man, you know how this city is, man. I'm getting the hell out of this city. Now they're giving advice on what to do. Look, when you go in there, I'm gonna tell you exactly what you need to do. So the emotional urgency, when we're in an emotionally vulnerable situation, anything that anybody tells us to deal with that emotional moment right then there, we'll take it. And so the emotional urgency really becomes a common reason why some people take the bad advice. Might be the reason why you've been taking bad advice, right? The authority illusion, right? Now, what is authority illusion, right? You're taking advice from people who give the illusion or the appearance of being an authority because they're so damn confident. But let me let you know something. Confidence doesn't equal competent. Right. So that's the bad advice that you see, especially people dealing with legal situations. Everybody's giving advice on what to do in situations, especially in relationships. Someone is contemplating whether or not they should separate, whether or not they should get a divorce. But the truth is they need to be in therapy. But the person who they're talking to, because of the urgency or the familiarity, the person they're talking to sounds so confident, you need to get an attorney right now. I done seen this before. You get an attorney, put that attorney in place, and then you need to start documenting. And so now they are reliving their case, or let me say this, they're reliving the bad decisions that they make. So now, while the truth is, this is a great opportunity for you and your mate to go see a third party or a therapist or someone to talk to around your issue, but you're taking advice from someone who has mastered or the illusion of authority, and they're telling you everything to do, and it makes sense to you. They're very confident and passionate in the position that they're taking, but they're not competent. Their advice is based off of their experience. So people take advice, bad advice, from these unhealthy advisors. We take that advice because of the illusion or the appearance of being authority figures. Now think about that. And you take inventory. Are you giving people advice based off of your experience? Now, this is a very interesting one. So in my class, one of my classes, whenever the first day of class, the first question that I ask people, I say, give us your name, the behavior that got you here, and what you want to get out of the class. And the challenge in my women's class and the challenge in my men's class is that you have to listen to their story. And this thing I call cold talk. That means if I say the behavior that got you here, you describe the behavior as a charge, or you just, the behavior that got me here is simple battery, or the behavior that got me here from a social reason because the police ain't shit, right? And so you hear these things, but here's the challenge that happens in this authority. When people are explaining when people are explaining or talking about the situation that got them here, the person who engages in the illusion of authority, that person only needs to talk so much. And as you're listening, you're not really listening. What happened is that person with the illusion of authority, they put their own experience in it. So when you say, man, I'm here over some bullshit, and what ends up happening, you go, yeah, me too. I understand. Man, I'm here because, these police in these cities. Yeah, that's why I'm here too. Now, all of a sudden, the authorities said, no, this is the truth. And I get this all the time. No, Dr. White, this is the truth, man. You know, Dr. White, you just need to listen, man. You know the city of Atlanta and how they work and the way these cops are here in the city of Atlanta. And they sound like authorities in the situation. And because I told you all about the familiarity bias, I told you all about the emotional urgency. So then this person sounds to be such an authority, and they have really, in truth, put their trauma and their circumstance and situation, and they have imposed it onto yours. So it sounds like they're giving advice. It actually even sounds like they're familiar with your situation, but in truth, they're not. The person who gives the bad advice and the person who receives that advice, they're taking that advice because it sounds familiar and it sounds like it's coming from a person who really knows their stuff. And so I talk about the social, the authority of illusion, but y'all keep in mind what I'm saying. It is not, let me say that again, it is not competence. So that means that if you're not careful, you'll find yourself taking advice from a person who is headed to a dead end, driving a bus leading to a cliff, and you have gotten on that bus. But unhealed people who have a lot of trauma that are driving the emotional bus, they will put as many people, they don't realize it, but they will put as many people on that emotional bus as possible. And no one realizes that we're that unhealed person who's given all that trauma-based advice. They're driving them off of a cliff. And they sound like authorities. That's why they're driving it. Social validation becomes another reason why people will take bad advice, right? Social validation, they went through something similar, so they must know. And that's what we're talking about, that person who's driving that bus, right? They know this. They've been through it. Man, I didn't deal with them courts before. Man, I done been through this before. Bro, I'm listening to you. Man, listen, I understand. You got these trumped up charges. Listen, I understand when you start going through your phone and everything. I know women, women just don't trust, right? They start doing all this. And the social familiarity here, or the social validation, because the unhealed person has been through it. And so they must know. And especially with the person who's seeking advice, turn around and say, damn, that's exactly what happened to me. So what did you do? And then the unhealed person will start telling you what they did. Damn, so how did you handle that? And now all of a sudden, because that piece that I told you about, the emotional urgency, right? So now all of a sudden, the person who's been through it because of the illusion of confidence, y'all see how these are all connected? And now they're giving this advice, and you're taking not just a little of advice, all of a sudden the advice that the person is giving becomes gospel. Oh man, we can also call this the art of losing a relationship, the art of ending a marriage, all of these things, because they're very is superimposed, right? So, but sometimes people will give bad advice, and we will take bad advice because the person that you're talking to, they're not being honest and authentic with you. They want to have your back. And so we'll take advice from someone and not realizing that they're not being honest and they're not being authentic with us because they want to make sure that they have your back. But a true person who's given advice from a healing standpoint, instead of focusing on having your back, and y'all know what that means. That means some person that made a mistake, that been through something, and we have reached a point in society where we say, I'm always have my boy back, or I'm always have my girl back. But the truth is, it's not the back that we should get. It's having their front. So a healed person will see the decisions that you're making, and they care enough about you that they're going to give some advice up front about the decisions that you make. But the unhealed person will always be in the back to get your back, especially if you take their advice and it goes wrong, or it turns out just the way their situation is. And so then what has happened is that you have, not realizing, not helped yourself, but you have further justified or confirmed their brokenness. So the truth of the matter is that we take this advice from people thinking that it's helping us, but it may very well be perpetuating their own brokenness. So how do brokenness distort advice? Think about that as we went through, and we have to dig down a little bit more, because we have to reach the point of really kind of exploring a little bit that how does brokenness, again, you all, because you might be broken and you may not realize that you're giving advice or talking to people from a broken standpoint. So we pause for a moment and examine this thing about brokenness or distorted advice when you're broken. Now, This is different. This is probably nothing that you really honed in on, because what I'm about, these four little things I'm going to talk about, you may not be very familiar with it operating in the background of your own trauma. So here it is. Number one, right? How brokenness distorts advice. Trauma rewrites truth. Y'all write that down. Get your pen, right? This is when y'all should have your pens and no pens out on this one here. Trauma rewrites truth. Never trust anyone versus learn discernment, right? I'm going to say that again. Never trust anyone versus learn discernment. So we want to focus on understanding discernment. We're going to listen, but in this here is that even for you giving advice, is that the truth is the role of discernment becomes absolutely critical in this process. Fear-based narratives presented as wisdom, all right, is another way the brokenness distorts advice. The brokenness will take this fear-based narrative and present it as wisdom. That means that you might not have the high level of emotions or anything playing out, but the person may talk very well, calm, cool, and collective. And because they sound as if they're coming from a place of pure wisdom, we see that the advice is actually distorted because it's the fear-based narrative. Man, listen, you go through this, you do this, you go through this, you start this divorce process, and you did all this, man, it ain't no good outcome. So we find ourselves in terms of that trauma rewriting the truth. And when we can make a clear distinction, and the role of discernment becomes critical. Number two of how brokenness distorts advice: projection disguised as guidance. Ooh, no, slow down. Projection, right? Something you're projecting onto someone being disguised as guidance. Now, that one right there, that means that I'm projecting my own story. I'm projecting my own narrative. I'm projecting the stuff that I went through. And it sounds like I'm really giving you advice, but the truth is, everything I'm telling you to do is what I wish I would have done. But I'm not going to tell you that I didn't do it, I didn't get it right, I wish I would have done this way. It's going to show up in the form of me giving you advice. So leave them. When the advisor never processed their own abandonment, stay, and they choose to stay and endure it, and from someone who's conditioned to tolerate dysfunction. So I'm saying to you is that as you begin to listen, some people have been in a state of trauma, and their way to see things have become so incredibly distorted, and it's a form of dysfunction. Now, what they project and what they reach the point of communicating becomes how they handle and give all forms of advice. So the brokenness becomes distorted advice because they're not guiding people, that every person they talk to or come to them, they're projecting their own circumstance and their own situation that they're going through. And let me let y'all into something, a little secret here. Some people, they hate the position that they're in at the moment, and they hate the condition that they're in at the moment. And because they hate the position and the condition that they're in at the moment, you may not see it, but everything that comes out of their mouth is a manifestation of the position and the condition that I'm in. Let me give you an example. You're living with someone, and you're living with them because you really, to be honest with you, you can't afford to go nowhere else. Right? You done moved in. You're not on the lease. I don't care how much it looked like y'all doing everything together. You're not on the lease. You're in that relationship, or you there and you don't want to be. You hate the position and you hate the condition that you're in. And so now you're talking to people. Someone's thinking about moving in, or someone's talking about making a relationship more serious. And now you're giving guidance. But the truth is, you're projecting the disdain that you have for your own position and your own condition. Yeah, let that sit in. Now, I know that one right there may be a little troubling for some people, but the truth is, if you are not happy or pleased with the position or the condition you're in, I'm going to tell you, take inventory, because your brokenness becomes distorted advice that you give to other people. So the unhealed ego needs becomes another reason or another way that brokenness distorts advice. That is advice that serves the advisor's identity, right? The strong one, the victim or the rescuer, right? So here the unhealed ego becomes a part that stands out, right? So that advice serves as the advisor's identity. That means that they find value in giving advice to people, right? They wait and they will even get to the point of giving advice that wasn't asked for them. These are people who are looking at folks' situation and this here to satisfy their ego. Dog, I see what you're going through, man. I know you ain't asked me, but I just want to share with you some things that I kind of observed. Right. So here, that unhealed ego, that need right there begins to show up and began to show out. And that's where the projection comes in. That's where the masquerading as a guidance. That's where the trauma is rewriting the truth. The unhealed ego will do anything it can at that moment to give value to who they are, what they're doing, or to help them even begin to look at their own circumstance and condition in a healthier way. So the unhealed ego becomes part of what happens. My favorite one, when we talk about brokenness, distorted advice, is the normalization of the dysfunction, right? Toxic behavior reframed as this is just how the relationships are. So normalizing the dysfunction, man, this is just how women, man, bro, women are emotional. This is just how women are. Look, man, to be honest, man, this is how, black men are. All men are dogs. They got a little dog in them, right? And so we began to normalize a dysfunction or normalize the experience that we've gone through. Now, here's how you check do an inventory of whether or not someone has normalized or what I sometimes like to say, universalized their dysfunction. So I once in my women's group had a woman say all men are dogs or got a little dog in them, right? This is normalizing the dysfunction. That means that she has taken a strong stance. And I do something similar with my men's group, but just for the women, understand this. All men are dogs that got a little dog in them. And I hear that as a discussion, but all of these women, I'm 12 women in my class, 8 of the 12 women, they have sons. And so it compels me to ask the question to highlight or to demonstrate that they're rewriting a narrative, that their projection is masquerading as guidance, that they're dealing with an unhealed ego. I then ask the question, well, you have sons. Right? You 5, 10 years old. So if all men are dogs or got a little dog in them, then why are you raising a dog? To be a dog. Oh, Dr. White, my son ain't gonna be. No, you said all men are dogs or got a little dog in them. But here's where it gets real catchy. And, somebody's gonna probably want to jump on me about this, but I use illustrations to break through sometimes. Y'all just understand this is part of my intervention of finding different ways to get people to confront their universalized dysfunction. I say, well, if all men are dogs or got a little dog in them, and you are a mother and you're raising a dog, then what does that make you? What it makes you is the very thing that every woman on this planet should have take offense to. It makes you a bitch. And you're not, because that's a female dog. So I don't, and I never will accept that all men are dogs or got a little dog in them, because if you're being raised by a single mother, that is an indictment upon yourself. And the same argument that we make towards women here, right? Normalize the dysfunction. Every time I'm listening to men begin to tell me how women are, something happens that I discover. And what I discover is that every time men talk about how these women are out here, and then they compel me to take a position about how these women are, but there's this siloed way of thinking. Because if you tell me about how women are, I'm going to immediately say, well, so is that your mom, your grandmama, and your daughter? You got a daughter. So if you talk about all these women out here are manipulative, or they hoes, and I hear all of this language that you have assigned, as a matter of fact, The normalized dysfunction takes it into an even more unhealthier way. The normalized dysfunction doesn't even refer in my men's group and working with men who have universalized their dysfunction. They don't even call the women women, they call them females. So Dr. White, man, these females out here, man, you know how these females, and we're listening to all this language, but the normalizing the dysfunction, they silo their mothers, their grandmothers, and their daughters. So then they are describing all these other women, not realizing it until we confront them, right? This is what you do. You hold the mirror up. When you confront them, the brokenness, distorted advice that they give, when we really jump into their way of thinking, when we're holding up, we realize that you're talking about all these women, but you're not talking about your grandmother, your mother, or your daughter. So I like what Michael Eric Dyson once did when he said that men have this vertical, intense vertical bond. When it comes to their mothers or their daughters, they'll choke a stick, they'll drown water when it comes to their mothers or daughters. But I take that concept that I love and celebrate, and I say to the men that if all women are like this, then the question that I get posed, all right, y'all, I just gave you the advice, showed you what I did with the women. This is where it gets uncomfortable for the men. So if you tell me about all this negative stuff about women, and I say, well, you know, your mother and your daughter is someone's wife, or one day will become someone's wife. So the vertical thing, so when I take the mother and the daughter and I put it horizontal, that your mother and your daughter was somebody's wife or somebody's girlfriend. So now what you're talking about, it gets uncomfortable. Or if I take it even another level and say, okay, well, I want you to imagine your mother or your daughter as somebody's side piece. Maybe you're a product of being a side piece. Now that gets uncomfortable. The idea of referring to your mother as a female becomes problematic. So all of these things, when we began to look at it, the emotional confidence, the consequences, when we take this bad advice, it's confusion, it's self-doubt, we stay too long, it causes us to leave, we engage in these things that we call identity dysfunctions, all of this, that I need you all to understand that pain can teach. The things that some takeaways I want you all to understand, that pain can teach, but unhealed pain misleads. And courage, I need you all to understand, is healing before leading and discernment before decision making. And in the end, not every voice deserves a seat at the table of your life. I'm Dr. Gary O. White, and hopefully something that I said resonates with you. You take it and share it with someone else.